Do you know, I remember when Top of the Pops was a big part of my life. It's no longer the case. But now and again, I just catch a little of today's equivalent. And often wonder about the way some people seem to dress or jump about when songs are being sung. But there again, possibly my mum and dad were shocked by the stuff that I tuned into. How things change. I suppose in my day it was a big thing if you got to hold a girl's hand on your first date. But now things move so much more quickly. But that first kiss. I want to talk about kissing this morning. It may seem an odd thing for me to talk about, but just hang on with me for a wee bit. Lord Halifax once shared a railway compartment with two rather prim-looking women. A few moments before reaching the end of the journey, the train went into a tunnel. And in the darkness, Halifax kissed the back of his hand noisily several times. When the train stopped at the station, he rose up, he lifted his hat in a gentlemanly way to the ladies and said, "May I thank whichever one of you two ladies I'm indebted to for that charming incident in the tunnel." He then left, leaving the two ladies glaring at one another. So we'll talk for a few minutes about kissing. Sure, it's a strange theme, but don't blame me. The Apostle Paul, writing to the church at Corinth, urged them to greet one another with a holy kiss. And who am I to argue with him? If he wants to talk about kissing, so be it. Now, I'm told kissing is good for your health. If you want to be happy, healthy, successful, and live longer, give somebody a kiss. That's the conclusion of a recent study in Germany. Now, in fairness, this is not a good excuse to go around kissing the neighbour and saying, "But the minister said it was okay." But surely it's the most natural way for us to express our affection with a hug or a kiss. Leigh Hunt once wrote, "Jenny kissed me when we met, jumping from the chair she sat in. Time, you thief, who loves to remember things. Put that in. Say I'm weary, say I'm sad, say that health and wealth have missed me. Say I'm growing old, but add, Jenny kissed me." A kiss on both cheeks was quite common in many places in the world. Men kissed in biblical times. Remember how Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. So when Paul writes, "Greet one another with a holy kiss," they would understand. But what amuses me is that the good people of Corinth were fighting with one another. And they didn't have to go very far to kiss somebody they didn't like. He or she was probably seated just a few seats away. Fighting in the church is nothing new. People have always become upset with other people in the church. No wonder church folk in Utah were upset when a law was passed allowing worshippers to carry weapons in the church. Think how quickly things could get out of hand. What would happen if ministers were allowed to carry weapons into the pulpit? Might I see someone falling asleep during the sermon? And who knows what might happen? It's amazing how often Paul is trying to settle fights in the church. We have it easy compared to them. They were bad. So Paul writes, "Mind your ways, agree with one another, live at peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you. Greet one another with a holy kiss." Paul wanted them to end their fighting and be a supportive, loving community. You know, penguins survive in a very hostile environment. And I'll tell you how they do it. If they don't work together, they die. Thousands of them huddle together, providing each other with warmth. And they take turns walking around the outside while those in the huddle in the middle sleep. Teamwork means survival, and the selfish don't survive. I wonder if the same thing applies to us. We need a strong relationship with each other as well as with God if we're going to survive. Some years ago, 9 miners were trapped below ground in a flooded mine shaft. Rescue efforts began immediately, but the rescue crews knew they were up against it. The odds were stacked against them. But they all survived. And the men claimed it was their decision to bond together that saved them. They watched out for each other. In fact, they tied themselves together so that no one would float away or slip under the water. The miners vowed that whether they lived or whether they died, they would do it together. So I think Paul still has something to say to us. Finally, brethren and sisters, mend your ways, agree with one another, live in peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you. Greet one another with a holy kiss. Maybe that last bit of his message might be misunderstood in the 21st century, but there's no doubting the relevance of the rest of it. Agree with one another. Live in peace. It would be great if we could. What a world it would be. Amen. Dear Father, we wonder, does fighting ever solve anything? Whether it's on the international stage with open conflict, or when countries engage in war, it is often the innocent who suffer. Women and children are casualties in wars they did not start. But conflict of any sort is seldom positive. Conflict that happens behind closed doors, and the domestic violence that sadly many suffer. Conflict between husband and wife with children caught in the middle. Even watching what happens can scar the lives of those little ones. Conflict between neighbours and friends, often over trivial issues. Conflict in the church, the very last place it should happen, but it does. No wonder Paul sought to bring peace to those to whom he wrote these words, greet one another with a holy kiss. Our simple plea today is that we learn to live in harmony with those around us. We may not need to kiss them, but just to accept them and accept our differences. Is not peace what we all want in the world, in our family, with our friends? Help us to work towards it. Let there be peace shared among us. Amen.